Well, hello. It's Tuesday and not Friday. With the Thanksgiving holiday, I decided not to do anything on Friday, but to do something today. And I am in the background thinking about the US-Iran World Cup game and hoping that it's a good game and the best team wins. I'm leaning towards the US, obviously, but I want the best team to win. So onwards, on with our continuation of our step-by-step Geospatial-Next guide. I've added a little bit extra to what you can see below. It's really, ultimately, we're driving towards a strategy here. So building and executing a Geospatial-Next strategy is really what we're going towards. I've done a couple of talks on this, sort of introducing this in the last couple of weeks. This is going to be a continuation. This one, we're going to actually dive into more of the guts of this. And we're going to start really with step one, which is generating possibilities. So let's get stuck in. Right, well, let's begin with an image that I used in the last talk last week, actually the week before, this beautiful mountain. So we're talking about Geospatial-Next strategy, and I've emphasized it's very much about asking that what next question. So what do we mean by that? We're really talking about, and this is our journey, is what is your goal? Is it reachable? And how to get there. And where we're driving to again is those are the sort of the building blocks of a strategy. I want to get to the top of a mountain. Can I get there? Is it feasible? And if it is feasible, then how do I actually get there? So these are our reference points. And again, I'll emphasize geospatial is in transition. It's undergoing an enormous change. And again, if you hadn't seen my last couple of talks, I encourage you to go back there. We're seeing convergence of the different parts of the geospatial industry. What does that mean? It means new possibilities. It means new opportunities. That translates to new services and new products, which is really the base that I've come from. I've worked for many companies that work in the geospatial space. They're smaller companies, and more often than not, they're focused on services, but I've also worked in the product world as well. So I've got experience in both of those worlds. These worlds, our world of geospatial is changing. So what we're not going to be talking about in this series of talks is building a geospatial strategy. You can look at Matt Lewin, who's probably the best example of someone that's doing a lot of work in that space, building out that strategy within the GIS world specifically. So I point you there. We're not going to be building out a geospatial strategy. We will be using guiding frameworks, and if anyone that's listened to me speak before, I know that I like to work within frameworks. I find without frameworks, you kind of live in a state of chaos. Again, I'm overstating that. Some people work well without frameworks, but I like frameworks to help guide, to help provide direction for where one's going. And in this case, we're actually going to be talking about 3 over the next few talks. Today, we're going to be talking about generating possibilities. That's the start of our journey, and there's a framework for that. That actually is an input into the strategic choice process. And again, in the next talk, we'll walk through that one. And then ultimately where we're driving towards is building a strategy, and this strategy cascade, which is work that I've adapted from some giants in the field, and I'll talk about those folks when we get to that. So there's our guiding frameworks. Like I said, we're really talking now about generating possibilities, the first phase of things. So when folks get to this initial phase of thinking through things, they're a company that is looking to grow. They want to answer that what next, or take on that what next question. They want to grow their services. They want to add products to their mix, whatever they want to do. I've seen 2 common mistakes. Number 1, idea generation. Too often, that's a process of throwing darts at a wall. I've seen it where miscellaneous groups of folks are brought together in a room, maybe with a particular focus, and they kick around ideas. That's not necessarily the best way to do things. The second thing I've seen is this push to go to market, and I mentioned that last week in my last week talk. So going from idea to go to market in 2 steps. I've seen it done multiple times where there's this push. How quickly we've got these great ideas, how do we get them to market really quickly? That drive towards that inevitably leads to, in fact, both of these things leads to really a bin of wasted time and wasted money. More often than not, that process I've just described there, both of those approaches are fraught with problems and generally result in failure. So how do we get past that? How do we generate possibilities that don't end up us wasting time and money? So we have a process for this, and I've mentioned this before, but let's dive in at this point on what that looks like. So number one, there's the ideation process. Now, let me preface this by saying the important thing here is actually to gather together very specific groups. So the process of group gathering to start this process is to be very structured and very well thought out. You need to have the right people in the room is what I'm trying to say. So maybe you have customers, maybe you have SMEs, maybe you have technical folks, maybe you have managers, maybe you have sales guys. You need a mixture of people in the room, and junior people are really quite important in that mix as well. It's not just senior people. It's also really important that those groups aren't dominated by one or two people. It has to be a collaborative exchange of information. So what you're trying to do in this first phase of this process is really to, like I say, ideate with a collaborative group. The idea here is to really have some focus, and let's imagine a scenario where, I mean, I'll make something up, but we're very much an oil and gas company. That's where we make most of our money. And we've noticed that there are challenges in the operations area of oil and gas. So with that in mind, the ideation process might be, well, what are those pain points? What are the needs of those operations guys? What are the things that they're finding that's difficult that it could be that we could solve using geospatial data and technology? So there's the first part of this process. The next part is validation. Let's imagine that we come up with a group of ideas, and more often than not, 4 or 5 ideas are a good place to be. So, we come up with a number of pain points, a number of needs that we think are realistic or that customers are suffering with. Well, the next phase of this is to validate those things, is to validate those 5, is to go to customers, most importantly, and ask them those questions. And then again, those questions have to be very carefully thought through. How one teases out these things from customers is a science in itself. So it's not an idle process. Within this validation phase as well, and again, this is a high level phase. What are the market conditions? What's the competition like? Is there a crossing the chasm moment, for example, where there is a beachhead that you could actually win? So this validation process, again, it's at a high level, but it's taking those ideas that you've come up with and starting to validate which ones actually hold water here. The next piece, is this technically feasible? We can have wonderful ideas and we can validate the customers have got that, but you need a technical discovery, and that may actually involve bringing partners into the conversation. If you don't have those capabilities in-house, do you build them or do you bring a partner that always has those? So the technical discovery is really critical. You may find a great idea that customers have validated, but it's incredibly difficult and expensive to implement or impossible to implement. So at this stage, one has to understand from a technical perspective if what you're proposing is something that can actually be done, and it can be done within a costly manner. Talking of cost, many times I've seen the business model not discussed at this stage. Now, again, high level, but how will we make money from this? We've walked through the 3 phases. We've got the idea. We've got a group of ideas. We validated those ideas, and we've come up. We've done some technical discovery on them. Everything all the boxes are checked. But how will we make money from this? If we've got a partner in, what are their requirements? Are they charging a huge amount of money for data such that we can't charge very much to customers? A lot of things there. I mean, another thing is, which kind of goes back to validation that I didn't mention, is how much value is this to customers? Is this $1 million problem or is this a $10 problem? That's going to build into what your business model is going to be. So you've got to think that one through. So those are the 4 stages that I've kind of defined and seen done really well and implemented myself in generating possibilities. So what do we do next? And again, one's hope is that you've come up with 4 or 5 possibilities that have walked through this, you've walked through this process, and you're ready to move to the next stage. If you've only got one or two possibilities, my suggestion is you iterate on this. You go back to the ideation stage and you go through it again. The idea really is to come into this with, again, 4 or 5 possibilities, which we then have available to us to feed into the strategic choice process. And we will talk about the strategic choice process next time, but this is the second critical stage that we need to go through. We need to narrow down the possibilities, is where that's going to take us to. So we've gone through a process of generating possibilities. The next stage in this journey is to actually look at each of those in depth. And again, we'll talk about some of the questions we're going to ask in that strategic choice process that need answers, and we move on from there. So that's today's talk. It's a bit of a deeper dive, this one, like I said, but this is step 1 in what ultimately is building out our strategy and then moving beyond that, which we'll take forward in the next few talks that we do. So I always welcome comments, feedback, thoughts that you've got, and I look forward to doing the next talk. Thanks for watching. Thanks for joining us on the Geospatial-Next channel. We're focused here on understanding the future of geospatial. That's both how we get to mainstream adoption of the technology and data, and how we start using blockchain and crypto to move things forward. Please feel free to subscribe to the channel, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.